Discussion tonight. I'm your host, Desi Sanchez. I'm so glad that all of you have come out. Welcome, bienvenidos. If you guys didn't know, this is Strategizing Visibility for Latino Creative Professionals. If you were here for a burlesque show, you're in the wrong room. Please, you should probably exit now. We're not doing that tonight. In case you didn't know, this panel is part of Conversaciones, which is a series of events that promotes inquiry and dialogue into issues affecting the professional growth of Latino designers and creatives, which I'm assuming at least one of you out there is, hopefully, so that this will be pertinent to you. And it's being co-sponsored by both NYDesigns and New York Designs. And NYDesigns is actually a program here at SBA. It's part of the continuing ed department, tailored to the unique cultural voice of Hispanic Americans. And the continuing education department here at SBA, it offers a really broad curriculum. Really proud to be part of this because I know I started my education at SBA in the continuing ed department many years ago, and then therefore it is near and dear to my heart personally. And you should know also about the co-sponsor, New York Designs. We are so honored to have them supporting us this time around. They're located in LIC. And they support and promote design entrepreneurs from all backgrounds and stages of growth. They recently, just last year, they published this report on Latino participation in the New York City design economy. It's called Créate Diseñadoras de Nueva York. And you guys should check that out if you get a chance. All right, now I'm going to start with introducing some of our esteemed panelists. As you can see there, they're sitting there. So they have their water. All right, good. I'm sorry, if you didn't get water, you can come up later and I'll let you have some online. First of all, please welcome Mr. Luigi Laguna. He is a talented voiceover artist, actor, accessories designer, multi-talented gentleman. He's currently the voice of Burger King for the Hispanic market. I love the character. He gave a little sample earlier, hysterical. And he's also the founder and main designer of BeBu Leather, which is an accessory. Please, can you see the watch? I love the watch. Check this out. That's some of his work right there. So please, a round of applause, please, for Mr. Luigi Laguna. Welcome. Look at that performer right to the beginning. And right next to him, the lovely Miss Alison Meislin is here, and she hails from Vitamin T. She is a recruiter, and Vitamin T is a creative staffing agency. They cater to Fortune 1000 companies and smaller. So basically there's agencies, there's nonprofits, startups, and she's the one who's getting all of you guys the jobs at places like that. So she's definitely one to watch and one to speak to. Please welcome and round of applause for Miss Alison Meislin. Thanks for joining us, Alison. Coming right up next is Mr. Javier Fuentes. And Javier Fuentes is the Vice President and Executive Creative Director of Vidal Partnership. And you guys have to know about this organization. It's an award-winning ad agency. And they actually focus exclusively on the Hispanic market. So he's definitely another one to talk to and one to watch. Vidal Partnership is an A-list multicultural agency of the year twice in advertising age. And they boast clients ranging from Heineken to Sprint to Nissan. So he knows his stuff, and he definitely has a lot to offer today. Please, a round of applause for Javier Fuentes. And last but certainly not least is Ms. Elizabeth Pastor. And she is the founder and co-founder and partner of Humantific. And I gotta tell you guys what that is. They're a very interesting company that I learned all about today. Very well. She's a consultant, an innovation facilitator, and a visual sense maker. And you guys really have to look them up online if you can, because what they do is very unique. They help companies strategize, understand problems, and communicate both internally and out externally. And they use everything from visual media to actually speaking. I mean, everything she does is very integrative. And it's all together, really. It's making people understand things. I could actually use some sense making right now, Elizabeth. Can you put some up right there? Because I'm not making any sense. You got a flip chart? You got a flip chart? No, she's also the partner and co-founder of NextDesign Leadership Institute, an institute that's also very important in the industry. And I want to let you know some of the clients that Humantific has. Hello, welcome. Hi. Some of their clients include the BBC, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, Pfizer, Sermo, and Vodafone. And I'm sure she has a lot to offer today as well. We're so glad to have you here. A big round of applause for Elizabeth Basco. All right, now we're going to get to it. We've got a lot of questions to answer today and a lot of answers to get to. We're going to talk a little bit about the situation right now as it is with the market, with the Latino design community. And our panelists are going to give their take on basically what's going on. So we're going to talk about what does the Latino market look like to you in terms of the talent pool or the consumer market. And the first person I want to hit on actually is Alison, because I think you kind of hit it on the head that there seems to be a lack. You're not seeing a lot of people. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're unfortunately, as explained, we're unfortunately not seeing.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, better.
Saying we're unfortunately not seeing as big of a response. In what I do generally is post a job. If a client will come to me and say there's an opening, I'll post it on the internet. I'll get responses back, and I was thinking about it, and I think about 2 to maybe 5, if I'm being generous, 5% actually comes from the Latino population, so it's definitely lacking.
So people have to get out there and put themselves out there regardless, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, now on the flip side, I'd love to talk to Javier about what you're seeing, because you're focusing exclusively on this market. Can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah, pretty much everyone we hire in our creative department is from Hispanic descent or Hispanics. So I guess we have a lot of resumes I can forward you.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
We have some resumes here too.
Yeah,
so by the way, please.
There's still, it's difficult to find, the right candidates. We're always sort of like looking for a right balance between someone who can speak English, understand the cultural insights, but at the same time is, acculturated enough to sort of be a good fit for, whatever brand we're working on.
Right, and specifically, can you talk a little bit about the cultural relevancy that you were talking about, the different countries and stuff like that? Is there a difference?
Yeah, sure. So it's a very complex market, as you guys all know, because the Hispanic population is conformed by, I'm not going to get into all of them, but Caribbeans, Mexicans, South Americans. So it's it's very difficult to communicate to a pocket of Puerto Ricans that live in the barrio versus an immigrant, Mexican immigrant that just moved to the U.S. So those are like 2 sort of like different targets. But at the same time, we need to talk to both of them in a way that is relevant. We cannot alienate one versus the other. So it's a very complex market, and it's a really fascinating place to be working on. So depending on the brands that we're working on, for example, in the case of Heineken, we do something that is a little bit more targeted, like we talk to Caribbeans and to Mexicans with the same voice, but with actually different cultural nuances. And then for a brand like Sprint, we sort of talk to a more sort of pan-Hispanic consumer, if you will. And those are conformed by Mexicans and Caribbeans and South Americans and whatnot. But we try to find a language that sort of is enticing to all of them.
Elizabeth, you had mentioned to me earlier how Latin America is such a huge market compared to the U.S. and the European shaky economic situation. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. I mean, what I was just saying is that I personally do not do a lot of business in Latin America. My business is more in the U.S. and sometimes it takes me to Europe. It really is wherever it pops, but I don't market specifically to Latin America. But I do see from the people that I know that are working there, and I have friends that have businesses that are here, and they work with Latin America, that it's a booming market right now. If you talk to Europe, everything's bleak. Asia and Latin America are the big markets right now. So, if we all have a Latin background that you can connect with the culture, I think it's definitely a place to be and target.
Thank you. And Luigi, I want to talk to you about the Latino American experience. Can you talk to me about the advantages and disadvantages?
Sure. I would like to add a little bit of the
Absolutely.
market. In my opinion, the Latin market is expanding and growing and increasing the power, the buying power, and also you see in my personal experience, the advertising companies, the big ones, are now creating a Latin department. And 3-4 years ago, they didn't even put attention in the Latin market. So in my opinion, it's growing and expanding, and this is very positive. Even for the Latinos. Yeah.
Right, like your experience when you came here. I mean, you found work pretty much.
Right, and in my experience for the Latin America, in Latin America is more, for when you work for the Latin American market, they appreciate the path you've been struggling here because it's the first work. And when you're successful here and you're trying to sell in Latin America, they appreciate it. So that gives you value.
So it looks like this is the place to start, but once you're good here, you're good.
Right, the doors open in Latin America easier when you're succeeding in the US market. And also the US, in my personal experience, they appreciate the Latin roots and my creations. I try to put my personality, my background, my Aztec roots, and I like to mix the technology with all the influences from New York and the fashion. But if you put all together in the United States, they like the handmade stuff, the Latin folklore.
Right. Specifically, you're talking about BeBu Leather, how your
Right.
designs incorporate both Mexican and American sensibilities.
Exactly.
And you found that's been beneficial for you?
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the existing situation that we have. I also wanted to talk about the differences in reaching out to Latinos in America versus reaching out to Latinos in Latin America and reaching out to those in Spain. Do we have any commentary on that, Javier?
It's very different. Communicating with Mexicans in Mexico or Spaniards in Spain or Puerto Puerto Rico versus Hispanics in the US, because at the end of the day, these people that, one of them, that moved to the US, they sort of are conformed by a new identity that sort of like embraces both cultures, the US culture and their sort of like Latino culture. So I think that's a big departure from, just being Mexican, targeting Mexican target. So it's just a completely different sort of mindset, a completely different way of thinking and going about your daily life. It's like about these two worlds, and I just sort of live between these two sort of like forces, which are like your Latino heritage versus your new American influence, and that new person that you become is that sort of like what we call Hispanics. Don't exist, and they're like Puerto Ricans or Mexicans or Spaniards.
Right, so there's a big difference.
Right.
Elizabeth, you have spoken, you say you don't specifically target Latinos, but you have done business with companies obviously in Spain. And do you see a difference there in terms of communications and reaching out culturally?
Well, I think you always have to, wherever you are, it's different. I mean, you go to Spain and you watch TV and you talk to people, and the vibe is different, right? So you have to do whatever you do so that it makes sense to wherever you are. And that's hard to know unless you kind of really understand the culture from that culture. So, we were talking about before that even at the level of, whether you're communicating or just doing business, I think that the advantage is that whether you're here and you have your Spanish heritage and you're doing business here, there's something that you can bring that's different and the same way. So when I go to Spain, people are a little bit more formal or relaxed, but I actually bring a little bit more of my American way of doing business, which is a little bit more formal. And it's kind of like, they think, well, she's kind of American, or, I have the excuse, right? So I teach workshops, I facilitate groups, and I can kind of make them come at the right time, not like half an hour after, or I can be able to the police.
How dare you?
And and the same thing.
What time we started this panel?
Same thing the other way around. You're here, and Spanish cultures are a little bit more social, a little bit more relaxed. You bring that in, and it just, I think it adds, right? It adds sort of a slightly different perspective. So,
absolutely. Okay, so did you want to add anything, Luigi, to that?
Well, my experience in Spain, for example, they love even if we have similar culture, they love all the folklore, the animals, the nature, representation of the nature, colors, the animals. So I I succeed selling part of my home collection in Spain to the Corte Inglés because that.
So there doesn't seem to be a huge divide between the Latin countries that's like difficult to manage. The divide seems to be mostly between American versus Latin in terms of communication styles. Doesn't seem to be that different. Anybody, yeah. Alison, I was just curious, outside of our questions, do you see jobs opening up that look for specifically sensibilities from one country, or do they just look?
I think that they do, but they don't necessarily specify it in the job description, if that makes sense. So it'll be an American-based company looking for a Spanish speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll be trying to target HBO, for example, not necessarily a vitamin T's client, but our corporate division A+ client. They'll maybe be targeting Spain, but from New York, and they won't say it needs to encompass the Spanish culture, but it'll be something that, somebody could bring to the table if they had it.
Maybe something in the back of their head. And that leads us to the next section, which is, as a recruiter, what are you looking for in resumes? How can you suggest that Latino applicants emphasize or highlight their experiences and language skills beyond just listing that they're fluent?
Well, I think that's a big thing that you just said. I think listing it on your resume is huge. It's a skill. It's something that makes you, it gives you the upper hand. It makes you more valuable than your counterpart who doesn't have it. So definitely emphasizing that, making sure it's present on the resume, and then beyond that, when you describe what you've done in your, past positions, maybe adding in how your cultural emphasis or your bilingual abilities helped with the position that you are in. Definitely recommend doing that.
And piggybacking on that, I think what's really important now is that the general market is becoming, Hispanics are becoming the general market, not the actual general market. So I think that, besides the language, which is something that's, crucial and very important to be bilingual, it's also very important to be bicultural. And I think that's really sort of becoming something really, really valuable for general market agencies represents for sort of like the bigger piece of the pie, which, very soon is going to be Hispanic.
And how do people highlight that?
People highlight just, what I do is very specific, we do creativity, so I think your book needs to show that versatility that you can sort of navigate through through both worlds, and that your book is sort of built in insights that are very much relatable to your Latino identity and to your new identity formed by the U.S.
So everybody's interested, even beyond that, what are you looking for when you look at resumes and when you look at people's books?
Well, I look for good ideas. I think that's the first sort of asset, I think it's important to see, being Latin is great, but if you don't have great ideas, so I don't really care where you're from. So I think that's sort of the first round of if you have a really strong portfolio that has very solid strategic thinking and creative thinking, then you look at that portfolio, and then if you're, for example, in the case of we get a new round, we're targeting particularly Mexicans, so maybe I'm looking for copywriters that have a Mexican background, they understand Latino, and they understand how to communicate in a powerful manner to that target. So.
Okay, and not to harp on this, but Alison, you mentioned to me earlier about highlighting times when you bridged a cultural divide. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, I think that's really important. and just kind of emphasizing what I said earlier, mentioned earlier, it is valuable because when you're looking at something, it's beyond language, it's culture, it's your experience, and so you add a lot to what the client is looking for, because you're able to look at the project or whatever it may be and see something that even your creative director or whoever it is that you're working with, your team doesn't see. So as far as going back to your previous projects, like I was mentioned earlier in the resume, adding in, I added that perspective. I knew what they were looking for in Latin America. I knew what they were looking for with this particular demographic. I think that's
So bullet point that. Absolutely. Now on the flip side, for entrepreneurs, for consultants, Elizabeth, how do you think that you make yourself stand out? So you don't particularly bring out your Latin heritage, but how do you feel that maybe it helps you a little bit, makes you stand out a little bit more in the competition?
I actually don't highlight it all, to be perfectly honest. So
You said it comes out a little bit?
Yeah, what I mean is that people hire me for the work that I do and for my expertise, and in my bio it says at the end, she's from Madrid, lives in New York, so maybe, as you're saying, I should be doing more of that, but my market is mainly here, and I do a lot of work in other places, and obviously it comes out when I meet clients and we talk, and from there is, well, where are you from? Well, from Spain. Great. So that adds a lot of your clients are diverse. So a lot of the clients that I have here, many of them are Latino. So it definitely brings a connection where I can connect with them and with an additional level. So it's like, you have another side.
It's like the onion that you're
it's like you have a multifaceted prism, and one of the prisms that you have is that you can joke about things that are Latin or Spanish. If you're doing business, obviously in Latin America or Spain or even Europe, I work, like Pfizer is a global company, and usually when I'm working on anything, there's people from different places. A lot of times it involves people in Europe, and it actually, brings out that you start talking about this, so you understand a little bit more of the situation. You're not just, you don't only have one kind of facet, but you have another facet. So I think that's definitely a big advantage. So it's not necessarily that I use it as a selling point to sell my business or what I do, but it's part of the equation, part of the conversation, and I think it's definitely an advantage.
So you're not pushing it, but you're not hiding it.
No, I guess if I needed to push it for specific reasons, then I might. But.
And to build on that, I think that there's been a big change, and I think it will be much of a bigger change in the future. I think like at the C level, the CMOs and the CEOs levels, we're now seeing that we're like a more diverse sort of segment there that it wasn't when I started working in advertising in this country 14 years ago. So I think like the US is becoming more diverse, and you're seeing that people are like the decision makers. Before it was like this, very like white Caucasian guy from Ohio who had no exposure to diversity whatsoever, and now it's the person that you were talking to at all level, and now like these people that understand diversity, that they might have a Hispanic background, they might be completely acculturated, that their parents are Hispanic. I think that we're seeing some like a shift in that.
So be prepared.
Be prepared.
So Luigi, I want to talk to you about how you make yourself stand out, and any advice you would have for other Latino creative entrepreneurs.
Well, I think it's very important to know your audience, to see who you're going to meet with, and know your qualities, your capacity, your talents, and bring it out with all your personality. And for me, it's very important to be yourself. I think it's the biggest quality you can bring is be yourself, bring your personality. And I don't know, for example, if I want to present, even if I'm a crazy guy and I want to present myself, I can
Good evening, everybody. My name is Martin. I'm a physicist, but I studied scientist, and I've been a scientist for more than 20 years. But now I'm a
extreme louder. You have to present yourself, be yourself.
Or your other self.
Or your other self. And I'm sure people are going to remember you.
I think everybody's going to remember you.
You have to be creative.
I got it. All right. Do any of you have any experiences, and I've gone through your answers, any experiences at all in terms of like we're highlighting one's Latin heritage, or where there's been any disadvantages, where it's been a no, it's not worked out? There's not been anything negative? So it's all positive. All right, that's good, because then we can move on to future in terms of what we see coming up and what we can do to prepare for it. I want to talk about emerging trends in the industries, and I might as well start with Luigi since we ended with you. What kind of trends do you see coming up?
I think with the technology and the internet and everything in my personal experience in the fashion, the good thing is that fashion always change, but the internet helps you to expand and expose. You can expose yourself more and more in the internet. And I'm sure all the shopping for example, all the accessories and the fashion things, the shopping in the internet is going to be more. I think it's growing in a very important way.
Do you have any comparison between the market here in the U.S. and in terms of the internet and stuff like that, and in other countries?
Sure, absolutely. I think that people use more internet here than in Latin America because the people are contagious more with for example, New York very competitive, so everybody is in competition and they're trying to be better and they use more the technology, the social media. And in my experience in Mexico, there are just a few segments of the people they have access for the technology for me.
So if you're going to target the Latin market, would you use a different strategy in terms of less internet?
No. I think the internet is global. This is a great benefit to use the internet, and it's trying to use I think the internet is going to be more global, and for example, to sell your products or whatever you do, then you can have amazing exposure through the internet. And it's where I think where everything is going, social media.
Okay. And Javier, can we talk a little bit about how agencies are changing, how the faces of agencies are changing in the industry as going forward? You said that some of them are having actual Hispanic or multicultural divisions?
I think like 10 years ago, the Hispanic sort of conversation was a very niche conversation, and we were invited to the big sort of to the big decision-making process, if you will. In the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen an emerging trend where all this C-level really sort of like becoming very engaged with the Latin market and trying to understand how this consumer, that is soon going to become the general market consumer, how this consumer is thinking. So I think that's a big change, and we've seen it. The big networks, the big advertising networks, have all created now sort of like multicultural units within. Before it was more about I'm a bigger agency, and then I have my small Hispanic shop, Hispanic independent agency. It was a part of the network, part of the holding company, and that worked out great because the money was okay, but it wasn't that great. Now the economy's going down, like they are trying this, big agencies are trying to meet their numbers, what they're doing, understanding themselves, they're going for the bigger part of the pie. And now what they're doing is that before it was this small Hispanic shop that was shared by the network. Now it's like, okay, you're on your own. I'm creating my own multicultural unit because I want to cash in all that money that is targeted to Hispanics. It makes a lot of sense.
So if you were sending in your resume or your book, you just target the big agencies with some of your multicultural experience, and it would be well received.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen that trend, like the creatives that work in Vidal, for example, they're approached by big marketing agencies.
Oh, they're trying to take your people.
Yeah, my people. And every day, like, you see this trend that like all the big agencies are like trying to find that expertise and bringing.
They're following your footsteps. That's common.
Yeah, exactly.
Alison, what are you seeing in terms of the jobs opening up and the kind of trends that you're seeing in the industry?
I would say based on my experience and then based on a little bit of research that I did, Spanish-speaking population in New York especially is increasing tremendously. So there's a ton of opportunity there. And then, as you mentioned, the economy is plummeting a little in the United States, and so they are reaching out to the Latin American culture. So there's a ton of opportunity there as well.
Okay, so people should focus to they should definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah,
definitely. And Elizabeth, do you see any trends that are emerging? You said that you might start maybe changing things a little bit. What do you see coming up?
To build on what he was saying, money talks, right? So there's a great potential. I mean, I'm not in advertising, but I think that a lot of these things that we're seeing in that space is, cha-ching, there's a lot of money there. What am I going to do? How can I target this market? And I better get my act together. So great opportunity if you're in that business. But I think in everything, like he was saying, New York. I mean, we live in New York, and I think it's a particular market where you see the Spanish, presence is been increasing more and more, and it still is. So, everything from when you go to a hospital, and everything's in Spanish. Sometimes in Chinese, but it's always in Spanish. To you put on the TV, and there's shows that are Latino, I would say based. There's a lot of shows. I'm not even talking about Latino channels, but just a lot of programs, are actually showcasing families that are bicultural. So there's those needs are everywhere. You can think about it as like, okay, there's a lot of people to sell from a marketing perspective, but there's also a lot of needs that all these people have. So, hey, we have an uptake in that equation, right? Whether it's here or whether it's yes, in Latin America. Right now, let's take advantage of that.
So be aware of it.
Yeah, as my friend said, she said, she's from Colombia, she said, well, it's our turn now, right? Asia one time ago, then Europe, and then the US give us a chance. It's our chance to kind of like rise up there. So there's a very important market there.
All right, now we're going to flow into our last two questions. Now this one's going to throw out there to all the panelists because it's kind of general. What do you guys think is going to happen with the Spanish language? Because, there's that whole flow of how immigration works where you come here and you try to assimilate, and I think that happened to the Hispanic community earlier in the last century. But now we're seeing like this kind of influx of new immigrants that are retaining their language, but at the same time, there's so many variations. You have a family like mine that's basically lost their Spanish, and I'm trying to learn it, trying to keep up. Estoy tratando, and then what do you think is going to happen to Spanish? Is it going to go away? Is it going to become a big Spanglish mess? What are we gonna see there? Any takers?
I think it's going to be growing, and also we're taking some words from talking about the bringing American English words in Spanish. So now for example, we're saying parquéate, or using American language.
Sounds like a bastardization.
It's going to be more and more. I think the Spanglish is going to be more popular.
Really?
Yes.
Does anybody concur with that, or do we think we're going to keep some pure Spanish here in the U.S.?
We already have many words that the English words Spanish people are using in Spanish, and the American people like salsa or vámonos.
So both ways.
Both ways. I think it's both ways. That's my.
I think that it's going to. I don't foresee any particular trend in terms of how we're using Spanish. I wonder what's going to happen to English in a particular way. Because I feel like people that it's a huge population that speaks both languages more and more. And the way we use Spanish is like I do my own translation mentally. I probably don't even think about it, but the way I speak is a very Spanish way of speaking using English. And I think that that's a really interesting sort of idea, right? Like how we're using how Spanish-speaking people are using English, and how that is going to have an effect on English itself, and how it's been used in this country versus 30 years ago. So I think that's really interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I give you a weird story. My little sister, when she was a kid, she was raised by my Cuban grandma, and she insisted on speaking English to her, but she speaks with an accent. So my little sister, even though she was born and raised here, up until she was 3, would say things like, "I see the cat," and it was because grandma was teaching her English. So that might be an interesting thing. In 30 years, everybody could be speaking English with an accent. That'll be kind of have to relearn my accent. I can do it. All right, we're going to head into our last question. We're going to talk about new technologies, new media, all that good stuff, all the stuff that we do, and how these new products and platform introductions will affect Latino creatives in representing themselves and their work. So let's talk about Latinos and the internet and new media and the differences. Is there a difference between how Latinos use the internet and new media? Do we see any of that?
Yes, I think we work with Sprint, which is a big telecommunications company, and we see that there's a big difference between the sort of like the use of technology and how Hispanics and Latinos are a lot more they're like early adopters of technology compared to their market counterparts, which is really interesting. Because at the end of the day, like all these platforms are pretty much English-based, but they manage to like go around and find their way, and it's interesting that we see like this sort of like big difference in terms of like how they can adopt a particular technology. It's pretty surprising.
Yes, Latino internet revolution here.
Right.
Anybody else have any comments on that?
I just know that when we were working on a project with Vodafone in Spain, so this is more the Spanish market. I don't know a lot, in general I think I have some ideas, but I don't know a lot of data about it. I know that in Spain, a lot of the studies about the use of internet and social media is that the use is very high because it's an extension of the social culture. So socially, people really get into it, but they don't necessarily buy as much. So it's how it's used. It's different. It's more for a different purpose. Though they are seeing that the trend is changing, and it has a lot to do also with the infrastructure that exists to the people. The people think that it's really a safe thing. You have a safe platform, and I think the U.S. has systems that are more robust and where people feel a bit more safe to basically make economic transactions. But there's the big trend is that it's changing a lot. So that's definitely I think there's a little bit.
It's interesting you make the commentary on social media, so maybe we need to all visit Facebook. What is it? Facebook.sp? Is that the Spain? What are they?
I have no idea, but it's probably ES.
ES, that's what it is. Facebook.es. We need to visit that then and check that out. Maybe a whole untapped market. It needs some nice design.
I don't know if it's different because when you're in Facebook, you have people from all over the world, right?
Yeah,
It's
same
the same.
Facebook. You can change the language.
Yeah.
So,
Really, I've seen different like Google, because there's a Desi Sanchez, I think, in Facebook something else, and I'm like, who is this pronunciation? I'm glad I didn't click on it. All right, does anybody else want to add on Latinos?
I think new generations are getting more formal and cultural education, so that will help a lot to understand more the new technology and the media. So they're going to expand. We're gonna see more users about it.
Absolutely. So it seems the consensus is internet yes, Latin yes, Spanish yes, and there seems to be no no's here. It seems to be all good, which is a good thing. I like positivity. I'm gonna open this up to the audience. If you guys have any questions? Obviously, we have 2 entrepreneurs and 2 people in a position of hiring. So if you have any questions for them, now's the time. I'll call on you guys.
I would say that it's definitely becoming more progressive. You can probably speak to this as well, where there is a specific, Latin division or Spanish division. It's not as prevalent as I would like it to be with the agencies that I work with. It's more position specific. But I guess just doing the research on, specific agencies, or maybe that's something for me as a recruiter to highlight. Maybe I can come up with a list of that and we can put that on our site. Something to think about. another question. It's synonymous. It's all the same. It just depends on, again, what the client's looking for and what they've been told they're looking for. So, again, as a recruiter, I usually say, this is the position title, and that's how you say it. Interactive, digital, creative, interaction. It's all kind of the same thing.
So you're not seeing a general prejudice against one of those terms?
Not at all.
5 versions of your resume.
Right, I think it's a great question. I think that humor is such a great device to communicate. It's a great device that we use in advertising all the time. I think that Latin humor, Latino humor versus the American humor is very different. So I think that more and more now, since there's this new sort of integration of the Latino target within the Euro market target, we're going to see a change in terms of the tonality and jokes that we're going to be exposed to. I don't know how long will that take? And it's like 2050 when this whole thing is really sort of converge, or not an idea. But I think that when this sort of Latino market takes over, the Euro market is really we're gonna see in the humor, reflected in the humor for sure.
This is a really interesting question. Actually speaks to the diversity of the Latino experience. There's recent immigrants. There are those who've been here for a long time. I actually asked that very question to my father, who's in political science, and it's a kind of a socioeconomic question about how humor translates and how humor originates within a culture, and how much of America is in a different place than a lot of America is. And when you come from a different socioeconomic background, the humor becomes a little bit broader. And then as you become more upwardly, more mobile, it becomes a little bit more, as you said, cynical and more specific and kind of subtle. So I think it talks about, money talks. So if the advertisers are seeing a large demographic of immigrants, that's who they're going to cater to. But maybe we need to make ourselves a little bit more visible as native born and as a, what do you call it, second, third, fourth, fifth generation. So hi, we're here, and yeah, we don't want the girls in the bikinis. That's okay.
Thank you. I was just was thinking of what you were just saying. You don't watch, I don't watch any Latin channels. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I don't feel identified with them. So in some way, it's you might be looking, and maybe this is the trend that we see, is that some shows that are on regular stations, that are just for everyone, and they're just reflecting society having a lot of sort of Latin components, and we're starting to see, I think, more shows that reflect that, and that reflects our reality here, not the show of Colombian TV, and you probably watch those shows if you're from Colombia and you're here, and you don't really totally find yourself in this culture. You might then watch that, but I think that's those are very different channels. And if we're talking more about the integration of Latin culture into American culture, then I think it's really when it goes the way it's going now, where we have a show and there's a Latin guy, there's an Indian guy, there's people from everywhere, and it's normal, and they're and some of them are very, very Latin, like what is it, the George Lopez, I don't even know what the name of it is, but that's all like a Latin family living in the U.S., but it's very Latin. But I see that I think you see more shows that just have a combination of all those things. And I think that's sort of what we're talking about more and more, right? Well, that's a reflection that's happening there in what everybody's watching and what everybody's feeling. What does that mean also to the other areas?
Yeah, is there any way to basically, you're coming from another country where you know how to find a job, how to look for a job. When coming here, now, what are the resources that she has in order to be as effective in looking for work? What can she do?
When I moved here 14 years ago, the first person I met was her. We actually worked in the same agency in Spain back in the day, and they connected me to listen. It's like, you're gonna meet Lisbeth, to our center, and all that. So we actually walk around Central Park for a long time ago. I think my advice will be just pull that sort of Latino or Argentinian or Mexican.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way if you weren't Latino, you go somewhere, and what do you call the people that you know? And you say, hey, I'm trying to get into there, do you know anybody? And you pull those things, right? And here, I mean, there's so many people from Argentina, there's so many people from Latin America, for Spain, from anybody that you know, and I think that's the easiest way. I am half American, half Spanish. So my mother's American, I have an American passport, I've studied here. So I haven't really come here, I don't have that experience. I've studied here and I kind of went the route of just not really, that's what I'm saying, I didn't really sell the fact that I'm from somewhere else. I just was like anybody else, and that didn't come into the equation. It was more I was selling my expertise, my skill, what I did. But I get a lot of people from Spain that call me, listen, it's hard, it's hard when you're coming from somewhere else. And for me, because I hire people, the things that I look for are obviously that they have the skills that I need, but they also have to have the language. Especially, even if you're working for a Spanish market here, it's going to be much easier. But the language is important if you're going to have to be dealing with a lot of other people. And, just kind of understanding things about just the culture, because you are in a different place. And, we can't be checking all the emails that somebody sends out. So I think it really depends on the role that you're going to have, that you're selling yourself for. What are the things that you're going to need to do? And, can you do them outside of your country or your area, or you're going to be able to navigate in the same way? But yeah, just call everyone that you know that can have this.
Yeah, my advice would be to recognize your talents, all your qualities, and expose all your qualities. I mean, in the networking is very important, but also if you want to start your, I don't know, if you're a designer, for example, a graphic designer, try to have exposure in the internet, create all the social media, expose your work, your talent, your creations, and you're gonna see somebody can pick up networking.
Are there any sites that you guys can recommend for her?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there are meetup groups. I don't know if you've heard of meetup.com, but there's a group for everybody. And if there isn't a group for what you're specifically looking for, start one. You'll see people will join, and maybe even graphic designers from where they're from. You meet somewhere once a week.
AIGA is big. LinkedIn, all the groups that are on LinkedIn, all the shows that are around the city. If you have a specific expertise that you're in, then you better go to all those things. You better connect with all those things. To me, that's the key, because I do get a lot of people that call me from somebody they know, and a lot of times I'm like, I wish I could help you, but this has nothing to do with what I do, right? I can think of somebody that I know, but it's really, at that level, you really want to connect with people. Because also graphic design is very big, right? So do you have a specific expertise, and is there, specific companies that are in that area? And as you're saying, it's very true. If it doesn't exist, create it, because then there's going to be a big focal point for you in that space.
That's the benefit of the media, that you can create your own project to help yourself and expand your work. Well, as I said, I think it's very important to know your audience, and if you're going to talk and try to sell to Spain, you have to know in advance what they're looking for, and you're going to specifically present all the qualities that they're looking for. And definitely, for example, Spain and Mexico, different markets, and they're looking for different things. So when you know your audience, try to bring your strong portfolio with the things that they're looking for. That's my advice.
Yeah, to build on that, I also, if you compare a Mexican person who lives in the DF versus a Mexican person who moved to the US, the Mexican person that moved to the US is like, they're sort of like in this quest for belonging to this country and this identity, and they move here because they want to have a better job, or they want to be in a safer environment, or they want to have a better education for their kids. So like all those insights really going to form this new persona. So you have, I guess, like a different sort of identity to play with in terms of who actually communicating to.
Basically, you're asking about the career trajectory. Did they always know they were going to do what they were planning to do? More or less?
We're willing to sell out. I guess, I think that's a question that you can only answer, to yourself, and you should try to be as honest as you can. And I knew I always wanted to be a writer, and that's what I've always been since very young. And then I worked in advertising, and I've been working in advertising for 15 years or more. I know I'm a writer. I know I want to eventually publish my books or eventually publish my stories. And did I sort of prostitute myself for 15 years? No. I had a great time. I love advertising. I love what I do. I just found the right balance. I think that you need to make money, you need to survive, you need to have a house, you need to be able to go to good school. And at the same time, it's like I've always had very clear that I wanted to write, and it's my true passion, if you will. And I think that you need to be very honest, and that's sort of balance that you decide that you want to live.
In my experience, I started communication and acting, and the designing came by accident. I didn't know that I love creation, so I always like to create things, and when people start to like it, and more is when I start to be more serious in my company and put structure, and that's what I did.
He's asking, how do we find a way to bridge the gap between being true to oneself and being acculturated or melding the two cultures?
I think it's always trying to be myself. That's the main key, and express who I am. And if I'm from Mexico and I have all that culture, and I'm here in this first world, trying to present all that to this market, try to recognize again what's my talent, my qualities, and try to put it on the table. And I found the creation and the roots from Mexico, and present what I like. And if I believe in what I'm doing, I'm sure somebody gonna like it. And that's what happens.
I think that it's a very personal, question about most people spend their lives trying to find, their passion, and some people are capable of doing that from their beginning. But I think it's a journey, and it's really you're the only person that's going to be able to figure it out. When I first went to school and I first worked, I realized I wasn't very happy, so I went back to graduate school, and there I found it. But it's hard. It takes time, and it takes a lot of research and figuring out what is it that I like, what is it that I don't like. And I started fine arts and graphic design, and I worked in graphic design for 4 years. And at the end, I basically said, I don't want to spend my life, designing packaging. It wasn't meaningful for me, but I could have, it's like you make decisions at different points of time that you can, go wherever you can at that point. So you're gonna, and nothing's perfect. Then you find something else, and the story's not perfect. But it's the old saying of trying to figure out what your passion is and work at it, because then every day you go to work is going to be fun. So.
All right, guys, I think we're going to wrap this up and move on to one of the most important parts of this panel, which is the networking, where you guys can kind of mix and mingle. But before we get to that, I want to thank everybody, all of our panelists, for being here.